What would you do if you woke up one morning to find your yard turned into a personal dumping ground? At first, I thought it was a mistake. A single black garbage bag, ripped open in the middle of my lawn, its contents spilling across the grass like the aftermath of some twisted scavenger hunt, crushed soda cans, greasy food wrappers, a soggy pizza box. Maybe a raccoon had dragged it over from the neighbor's trash. Annoying, but not the end of the world. But then I saw the second bag, and the third, both sitting neatly along the edge of my property, perfectly placed. My stomach twisted. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this on purpose. I glanced around, scanning the quiet countryside. My home wasn't in a crowded neighborhood, just a handful of houses spread out, each with its own stretch of land. Most of my neighbors kept to themselves, which was exactly the way I liked it. No nosy gossip, no unnecessary drama. That had changed 2 months ago, though, when Karen moved in. And from the moment she arrived, she made it clear she wasn't like the rest of us. Loud. Demanding. Complaining about everything. The road was too bumpy. The air smelled too earthy. The houses were too far apart. But worst of all, she had an opinion on everyone's property, especially mine. She made it her personal mission to comment on my unkempt yard every chance she got, even though my lawn was perfectly maintained. A low whimper pulled me from my thoughts. Buddy, my golden retriever, sniffed cautiously at the garbage, tail wagging uncertainly. I ran a hand through his fur, my irritation bubbling under the surface. Yeah, buddy, I don't like it either. I pulled out my phone and snapped a few photos. If this was going to be a problem, I wanted proof. Then, with a deep sigh, I started cleaning up. It took nearly an hour, and by the time I was done, my patience was razor thin. But the next morning, my yard was covered in even more trash. This wasn't just some petty act. This was war. The moment I stepped outside the next morning, I knew something was wrong. The air was crisp, the kind of morning that should have been peaceful, but the second I glanced toward my yard, a fresh wave of frustration crashed over me. More trash. And this time, it was worse. It wasn't just a few scattered bags anymore, it was a full-on pile. Old newspapers, cracked plastic containers, an empty detergent bottle, and, sitting right in the middle like a sick joke, a broken wooden chair. My fists clenched. This was deliberate. I scanned the area, my eyes locking onto Karen's house next door. Her curtains twitched. Someone was watching. I exhaled slowly, trying to keep my temper in check, but the truth was, I was seething. Yesterday, I'd hoped it was just some random prank or a misunderstanding. But this? This was intentional, and I had a damn good idea who was behind it. I stormed to the property line, my gaze locked onto Karen's pristine front yard. Not a single piece of trash. Not a single leaf out of place. How convenient. Enough was enough. I marched up to her front door and knocked, hard. A pause. Then the door swung open. There she stood, dressed in her usual overly polished outfit, heels, a pristine white blouse, and, for some ridiculous reason, oversized sunglasses even though the sun was barely out. She looked at me like I was a bug she had no interest in dealing with. "Can I help you?" Her voice was flat, uninterested, like she hadn't just been watching from her window a moment ago. I gestured toward my yard, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about the trash piling up on my property, would you?" She raised an eyebrow, then smirked. That smirk. "Oh, that?" she said, feigning innocence. "Well, it's not mine." I clenched my jaw. "Karen, I'm not in the mood for games. I spent an hour cleaning up yesterday, and today it's even worse. You're the only new person here. If you've got a problem with me, say it to my face." She sighed, dramatically, of course, then tilted her head. "Look, If you're having garbage issues, that's not my concern. But if I had to guess, maybe someone's trying to send you a message. My patience snapped. What kind of message? Her smirk widened. That you're not exactly the best neighbor. I stared at her, trying to gauge just how deep her level of entitlement ran. Karen, I said carefully, I don't bother anyone. I keep to myself. But if you're the one doing this, it needs to stop. She laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Oh, please. You think I have the time to deal with your little mess? I have far more important things to do than worry about some unkempt property. Unkempt. That word made my blood boil. My yard was perfectly fine before she showed up. I saw what she was doing. She was baiting me, trying to get a reaction. I took a step back and nodded, my voice steady. All right. If that's the way you want to play it. Her expression flickered, just for a second, like she hadn't expected me to back off so easily. But I wasn't backing off. Not really. As I turned and walked away, I pulled out my phone and dialed the county office. It was time to find out exactly what my rights were when it came to dealing with a neighbor like her. Because something told me this was just the beginning. The next few days passed in an eerie, unnatural quiet. No new trash appeared on my lawn. No passive-aggressive comments from Karen as I walked by. Too quiet. If there was one thing I knew about people like her, it was that they didn't just give up. They regrouped. I kept my cameras running, checking the footage every morning, but for once, everything seemed normal. Almost like she had finally gotten bored. Then, the notice arrived. I found it taped to my door one afternoon, an official-looking letter from Animal Control. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some random mix-up, until I read the details. A complaint has been filed regarding your pet. Reports indicate the animal in question has exhibited aggressive behavior, including attacking a neighbor and chasing children. A follow-up visit will be required to assess the threat level of the animal in question. I blinked. Then read it again. Attacked a neighbor? Chased children? Buddy? The same dog who greeted the mailman with a wagging tail and sad eyes if he didn't get pet? The same dog who was scared of his own reflection when he caught sight of himself in the window? My grip tightened around the paper. Karen. I barely had time to process it before a white van pulled up in front of my house, City Animal Control, printed on the side. A uniformed officer stepped out, clipboard in hand, scanning the property before making his way toward me. Mr. Carter, he asked. I forced myself to keep my voice calm. Yeah. He glanced at Buddy, who was sitting beside me, tail wagging, ears perked up like he was just happy to have company. We received multiple complaints about your dog being aggressive toward neighbors. Multiple. I wanted to laugh, but my anger was too sharp. My dog hasn't left this yard, I said. I have security cameras. You can check the footage yourself. The officer hesitated. That won't be necessary right now. But I do have to issue a warning. If another complaint is filed, we'll have to remove the animal until the investigation is complete. Remove. Like Buddy was some dangerous wild animal. I looked toward Karen's house. Her curtains moved slightly. Watching. Waiting. I met the officer's gaze. I understand. He gave me a polite nod and left. I clenched the notice in my fist. First, she dumped trash in my yard. Then, she tried to frame me for it. Now, she was going after my dog. If she thought I was going to roll over and take it, she was dead wrong. The next morning, I installed a new camera facing the street and my mailbox. I hadn't noticed it before, but some of my mail had been arriving late. Packages had been left in weird spots, like they'd been tampered with. I needed to know for sure. 2 days later, I had my answer. The footage showed Karen, dressed in her usual too fancy outfit, pretending to be on the phone as she casually reached into my mailbox. She rifled through my letters, then shoved them back in carelessly before walking away like nothing happened. I wasted no time. I drove straight to the post office, phone in hand, video ready to go. The clerk barely finished watching before her face darkened. "This is mail tampering," she said. "It's a federal offense." Finally. Karen had just crossed a line she couldn't talk her way out of. But when I got home, another envelope was waiting for me. This time, it wasn't from animal control. It wasn't from the county. It was from something called the Neighborhood Compliance Office. I opened it and felt my blood boil. The letter listed a series of violations. Overgrown grass and unkempt yard, a lie. Failure to maintain community standards, what standards? Unauthorized parking on private property, my own driveway. The kicker? There was no HOA in this neighborhood. Karen had faked an entire homeowners association just to send me harassment letters. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Losing my temper wouldn't solve anything. But I wasn't letting this slide. I took the letter, along with my mail tampering footage, straight to the county office. I explained everything, the fake violations, the staged complaints, the repeated harassment. The clerk listened carefully, then sighed. "We'll be looking into this immediately." That should have satisfied me. But when I pulled into my driveway later that evening, Karen was standing in her yard, waiting. Arms crossed. Smug as ever. She met my eyes, then smirked. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't done. The feeling of unease never left me. Even after filing my complaints, even after getting confirmation that Karen's fake HOA letters were being investigated, I knew better than to assume this was over. People like her didn't back down. They doubled down. They got desperate. And desperate people did dangerous things. I started checking my security footage obsessively, every morning and every night, waiting for the next stunt. Some mornings, I'd wake up, stomach tight with tension, expecting to find my mailbox ripped off its post or another citation taped to my door. But for the first time in weeks, nothing happened. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then, one night, Buddy started growling. Not his usual sleepy grumble when he shifted in his bed, not the excited bark he gave when he saw a rabbit in the yard. This was different. Deep. Low. A warning. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Reaching for my phone, I pulled up the live feed from my security cameras, scanning the dark shapes outside. And then, I saw it. A figure in the yard. Moving low, careful, spreading something along the grass. At first, I thought it was another round of garbage dumping. But as I zoomed in, I noticed the way the substance caught the light. Fine. Powdery. I jumped out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and rushed outside. But by the time I stepped onto the porch, they were gone. I looked down. The faint shimmer of powder lay scattered across the lawn, blending into the damp grass. My chest tightened. This wasn't garbage. This was something else. Buddy trotted over, nose twitching. "No." My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. I grabbed his collar, pulling him back inside. I didn't know what it was, but I wasn't taking any chances. I needed proof. Using a plastic bag, I carefully scooped some of the substance off the ground and sealed it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, at first light, I drove straight to the vet. The tech at the front desk barely had time to say good morning before I shoved the bag toward her. "I think someone tried to poison my dog," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained fury. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Let me get the doctor." 15 minutes later, the vet confirmed my worst fear. Rat poison. Not just any kind. The kind meant to kill fast. For a moment, all I could do was stare. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails bit into my skin. She tried to kill Buddy. This wasn't just about harassment anymore. This was an attack. I drove straight to the sheriff's office, gripping the bag of poison so hard my knuckles turned white. I wasn't just reporting a nuisance neighbor this time. I was reporting a crime. The deputy who had handled my earlier complaint looked up as soon as I walked in, his expression shifting when he saw the state I was in. I dropped the bag on his desk. Test it. It's rat poison. Someone spread it all over my yard last night. His jaw tightened. You have footage? I pulled out my phone, opening the security video, playing it in silence as he watched. The dark figure moving across my lawn, the deliberate way they sprinkled the poison, the undeniable fact that they had meant for Buddy to eat it. When the video ended, the deputy exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. This just turned into something serious. No kidding. He straightened. We'll send someone out immediately. By the time I got back home, a patrol car was already parked in front of Karen's house. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching. It took a while before she answered the door. When she finally did, she tried to play it off, her usual routine, probably pretending to be the victim. But the deputy wasn't buying it. I saw the way his posture stiffened, the way he gestured toward my house, the way Karen's expression flickered from feigned innocence to pure frustration. Then, the moment I'd been waiting for. The officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Karen's mouth opened in shock, her hands flying up in protest. But it didn't matter. For the first time since she moved in, she wasn't in control anymore. She was being arrested. As they led her toward the patrol car, she turned her head, locking eyes with me across the yard. Even through the window, I could feel the hatred in her glare. But it didn't matter anymore. She had lost. Karen's arrest should have felt like the end of a nightmare, but the next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, statements, and follow-ups with the authorities. The security footage, the fake HOA violations, the mail tampering, and, most damning of all, the attempted poisoning of my dog, it all stacked up against her like a house of cards ready to collapse. She fought back, of course. People like Karen always do. She pleaded innocence, claimed the video was doctored, insisted that I was harassing her and making things up to drive her out of the neighborhood. But the evidence didn't lie. The county pressed multiple charges: trespassing, harassment, false reporting, and, most severely, animal cruelty. It didn't take long before the case went to trial, and when it did, Karen's carefully constructed facade crumbled. The judge didn't go easy on her. She was sentenced to jail time, forced to pay thousands in fines, and ordered to stay away from me and my property indefinitely. And just like that, she was gone. For the first time in months, I felt true peace settle over my home. No more paranoia. No more waking up dreading what I might find in my yard. No more fake letters taped to my door or sideways glances from neighbors she had manipulated. The tension that had clung to my life like a storm cloud finally dissipated. I spent the following weeks enjoying the silence, drinking coffee on my porch with Buddy lying at my feet, watching the sun rise over a yard that was finally mine again. No trash. No poison. No Karen. Maybe some people are just wired to make life miserable for others. Maybe they thrive on control, on stirring up chaos just to see how much damage they can do. Or maybe they just can't stand it when they realize they've lost. Whatever the case, I had won. And this time, it was for good. But I wonder, have you ever had a neighbor like Karen? Someone who pushed you to the edge, who made you question your own sanity, who forced you to fight for what was already yours. Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.